you're looking at my natal chart in a
Do you feel naked?
yes, in a very prose form.
Yeah.
Without looking at the wheel itself, which we'll do a little bit of too.
You handed us your cheat sheet.
I handed you my my diagnosis from the universe, which is the really only one that really matters. And I talk about this in my documentary. I make an interesting juxtaposition between the paperwork that the world came up with for me and the paperwork that God came up with for me. I make a not so funny joke about that in the documentary, but I thought it would be interesting as a spring point. And the first important thing to say is, if you have no cursory knowledge of astrology, great. And if you have a little cursory knowledge of astrology, great, because it doesn't really matter in this case, because what I wanted to do today is use my chart as just a springboard to kind of inspire everybody in the room to kind of look at astrology the way that I do, which is a means to get to know oneself. I think the language, the science and language of astrology is for that very most important purpose. I would say even above going to another person who has a gift of reading your chart and has that kind of intuition. Those people can be powerful too. They can also be very, very shady. Some of them, there's a charlatan 1 out of 5 people or more. So, but the language of astrology, in my humble opinion, is really there for us to look at our own birth chart and learn about ourselves. Because in the last 20 years of my life, the more that I have looked into these coordinates right here, the more I have learned about myself in very deep ways, in ways that I could have never dreamt. And I have had help along the way a couple times with astrologers that sort of pointed me towards certain things. And if we have time, we'll be able to get to a couple of those interesting points. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dive in, and we're just going to use each sort of aspect as we go as a learning opportunity to gain more cursory knowledge of astrology in general. So in everyone's chart, there are all these points, these chart points. When you hear someone say, I'm a Capricorn, which is true, or I'm a Libra or whatever, then what they're talking about is that's their sun. The only thing they're really saying when I say I'm a Capricorn in general conversation, what they're talking about is my sun is in that sign during that month of the year when I was born. And there are all these other coordinates to one's. There's even more than this, but these are some of the main ones. And you'll notice right off the bat, if we may jump in, that there's more on this list than the so-called standard Elohim, or the naked eye astrology planets, which are Sun, Moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn. The first octave, if you will, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. The first 7 from the in out goes to Saturn. And then in the modern pantheon with the telescopes, they added Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and the so-called outer planets, which you could only see with the telescope, which are known to have a generational effect upon us here in the world. And then we have these other aspects of the astrology chart, which we'll hopefully touch upon, which are very important, particularly Chiron and the nodal axis, the Chiron is known as like an orb or a satellite in the sky. It's not a planet, but it is a place. It is an energetic light in the sky that has its own energetic, and it's known as the wounded healer. And it's a very, very important aspect of my particular natal chart, which is why I'm keeping it in to the mix today. And the same thing goes with the nodal axis, which is not a planet. It's an invisible axis point of the moon, which travels in a counterclockwise motion, and it affects our soul. It has to do with our soul, our karma, our past, and our soul's growth moving forward. Hopefully, I had time to talk about that. This is a big, big deal to me in my study of astrology. So, if we were to just jump right in and start with the main octave from the outward in, we would start with the sun. So, based on what you've got in front of you, you can see that my sun is 19 Capricorn, right? Which is to say that it's right here. It's right smack dab right in the middle of Capricorn in what would be called the second decan. It's firmly fixed in that sun. Now, what do we know about the sun, astrologically speaking, other than what I've already mentioned? What does the sun in your chart represent? What do we know about that? Anybody?
Like core personality.
Right. Core personality, your soul, your very core being. The core of your being is made up of two things, basically. It's your sun and your so-called rising sign. This is also called ascendant. You'll see it on the paper here. It says ascendant. That's also called your rising sign. Not to confuse this, because the sun is talking about that month of the year that the sun is in that area of the sky. In other words, if it's late December to mid to late January, the sun is in the sign of Capricorn. The rising sign has to do with the time of day you were born and the sun actually rising on the horizon at that time and place that you were born. This is why time and place is important to know about your birth to coordinate the chart properly. So your very soul comes through the sun, and your physical being and your personality, how other people see you, comes through the rising sign, the ascendant. And you will notice, what do you notice about my sun and my ascendant?
Capricorn.
They're both in Capricorn, aren't they? Yes, they are. So I am sun and rising sign Capricorn. Not everybody, I would say most people have a different sun and a different rising sign because it's just the luck of the draw. You got 12 chances, right? So to have them both is a big deal. Now, do we have any other Capricorns on the chart? Because there's one more. I have a stellium in Capricorn. Where is it?
Mercury.
Mercury, which is the next thing up. You get sun, moon. We'll talk about the moon here in a minute. Mercury is the furthest planet, the closest planet in. And what does Mercury represent in astrology? What does it represent in our being? Do we know? This is also important in my natal chart. Mercury rules the sign of Gemini. It also rules the sign of Virgo. And when you think about those two signs,
Expression.
yes, Gemini is the archetypal third house of the Zodiac, which has to do with thinking, communication. And Virgo, the archetypal sixth house of the Zodiac, has to do with analysis, breaking things down and analyzing them. Mercury has to do with your mind. We think of Mercury, the actual molecule of Mercury is known as quicksilver, right? So it's the thinker. Mercury is the planet, and physically speaking, it acts that way because Mercury is the planet that's never far from the sun. It takes a very short time to circumvent the zodiac, and because it's either in the same sign the sun is in, or the sign before it, or the sign after it, and it retrogrades 3 times a year. People talk about Mercury retrograde all the time. Why is it such a big deal? Because of the mind, communication, internet, cell phones, printers, fax machines, AI. That's all Mercury. And when we look at my chart here, we got to look closer at my chart, we're going to see that I have a Mercury placement, which is very, very poignant. And it has to do with mental health, because Mercury is the mind. So we've mentioned Mercury, and Mercury is way over here at 26 of Cap. So I've got what's called a stellium in Capricorn. A stellium is when you have 3 or more in the same sign, 3 or more entities which are taking up real estate in the same sign, creating a great deal of energy in that sign. So down here is my rising, my ascendant, and my Mercury. So if I may be so broad, what that means is body, mind, and soul is all Capricorn. All of it. So what does that mean? What do we know about Capricorn? Earth, cardinal Earth. The goat is the animal. What does the goat do? What does the mountain goat do particularly? They climb. And how particularly do they climb? What do they do that's peculiar and interesting? And the mountain goat when they climb?
The sun.
Yeah, because you got people.
Just really careful.
Yeah, they stand on a cliff that's about, less than that. And they're like bird's eye view of it, and they somehow get up to this crazy place. And how do they even get there? And then they don't know why they're there, and then they just jump and climb to the next one for no reason. This is Capricorn. This is the energy of Capricorn.
There's also the goat that passes out when it gets surprised. I had this.
And they also have the laugh when it gets going. I can't fake it very well, but the bleeding goat. Since I'm a rising, you can see it in the physical features. When I turn to the side, you can see the chin.
The goat.
And what do we call a man's chin hair? It's goatee. And I used to work when I was in college. I used to have one. It didn't look weird because my facial hair is all good, but the physical features are going to come out in somebody's rising sign. When you start to know this language, you're going to see it. If you know someone who has Scorpio rising, you will start to see avian bird features. If you know someone who is Taurian, who has a lot of Taurian sun and rising stuff in their chart, you're going to see bovine features. This is very real. When you start to learn the language, you really start to see it. So obviously I have a lot of goat and I wear black. What's the ruling planet of Capricorn? So we're going to learn a lot today. Saturn, absolutely. Now, the most important thing in anybody's chart, and I'm trying to have a teaching moment every chance I get here, so you all can be inspired to look at your own stuff. Because the most important aspect of your chart is your ruling planet. And your ruling planet is determined by where your sun is and where your rising sign is. My rising sign and my sun are in Capricorn. I am overruled by Saturn. I am wearing black from head to toe. Saturn is the black planet. You think about judges in the court. You think about referees in the games. You think about the Freemasonic robes. You think about graduation gowns at schools and colleges and universities. It's all black robes. This is Freemasonic, and it comes from Saturn. Saturn is the governor of the rules and the regulations of the physical world, the structure, the institutions of the world. The Capricorn in general is known as the CEOs of the Zodiac because they have this worldly power behind them of Saturn that gives them a leg up in the world. Now, when we get to know my chart a little better, you're going to find that ain't the case for me because I got a big problem in my chart that prevents me from having that in a particular way and guides me towards something else, towards poverty and towards charity and towards service and towards other things, mysticism. Whereas my physical being, my personality, my intellect in a Capricornian way was built to be CEO for a major corporation. But the rest of me was not. My soul, the affliction that's there, karmically so, is different. And we'll jump right to that point. Because as I said, the ruling planet is very important. And where is Saturn in my chart? Where is it?
Like 7th degree Aries?
7th degree of Aries. Now, this brings up, whoops, I misspelled that. There. This brings up a very important point because what we have between Capricorn and Aries is a square. Saturn is here in my chart. Now, a square, what does anybody know what a square is in astrology?
It's like smooth sailing and then a really hard like boom, and it's like you get stuck and then go smooth for a little while and then stuck again.
A square is a 90-degree angle, like the black I just drew. Because there's the front end of Capricorn, and there's the front end of Aries, and you see the perfect 90-degree angle. Well, imagine driving a vehicle and negotiating a 90-degree angle. What do you have to do?
Slow down.
You have to slow down almost to a stop. If it's a 120-degree angle, it's a little more simpatico, a little smoother. It's easier to communicate. The square in astrology is known as the most difficult aspect, if you will, because it's a 90-degree angle, and therefore this has a hard time communicating with this, which is to say that Saturn, which rules this area of the sky, is having trouble communicating with itself because of where it is when I'm born. My very ruling planet is muted. And it's overruling my mind, my body, and my soul, and it is muted in my birth chart. Any Capricorn who has Saturn in Aries is going to have a rough time. This is just a fact because this is the ruling planet. I have to live by Saturn's rules. And Saturn is stymied in this place. But there's an alchemy that can be woven out of it, see? Because there's an alchemy that can be woven in everybody's chart. There's something in it that we can find, and that's why the language is so beautiful and important. Let's move on. Where's the moon? The moon, 10 degrees Taurus, right? So there's another Earth, lot of Earth. Because Taurus is fixed Earth. So here's the moon. And what is the moon in astrology? What does the moon represent in us? Emotions, yes. The moon rules the sign of Cancer, which is the cardinal water sign, the flowing water. We think of the tides because the moon does govern the tides. It is a magnetic force between the earth and the moon together, and the water moves because of that. We are 70+% water inside, and therefore when the moon moves and waxes and wanes, it moves the waters of our being too. And what happens when we're emotional? Water, salty water, every single time. And that's the moon. And my moon is in a fixed earth sign. In other words, it's simpatico because it's feminine. Earth and water are feminine. Fire and air are masculine. And when I say masculine, feminine, I always remind, when I'm talking about this in this room, I always make the reminder. When I say masculine, feminine, I'm not saying male, female, because masculine and feminine are energy. The Kundalini is a double-coiled serpent. It's Ida and Pingala. We have men in the room. We have women in the room. All of us have both in the energetic sense. And the moon is feminine. And Taurus is feminine. And Capricorn, earth and water are feminine. So this just means, in addition to all the other complications that are in my chart, this just means that when I'm emotional, I like to eat, I like to drink, I like to be comfortable, I like to be warm and cozy, because that's Taurus. Taurus is comfort and warmth and food and everything that feels good in life. That is Taurus. And since the moon represents emotions, that's what I like to do when I'm emotional. What else? Now, what part of the body? This is an interesting part about my chart when you consider where the moon is. What part of the body does Taurus represent? Because every sign of the zodiac goes through your body. Do we know about that? Okay, you guys are going to learn a lot today. Because it starts from the very beginning of the zodiac, which is the springtime, the spring equinox, which is Aries, and it goes all the way around. The archetypal houses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay? So if Aries is 1, Taurus is 2. It starts in your head. Aries is your head. Taurus is your throat. You go all the way around, and Pisces is your feet. Well, we're just going to touch on that today because it's just not that lecture. But it's a cursory knowledge of all of it. But if you imagine that Taurus is your neck and your throat, and my emotions, my moon, are in my throat, what do I do? What do I do? What does Paul do with his throat?
Emote.
He sings. He sings. He's a singer, isn't he?
Yes.
Because his moon is in Taurus. Who else do we know who has moon in Taurus? That laugh, that infectious laugh that she has. Do I stutter?
Instinctive laugh, yes.
Because her moon is right here. When she feels laughter, except that I can't do it as well as she can. She has her moon here too. And we love to run it, don't we? We love to run it. That's why, there's another reason why I'm good at teaching, because of other things in my chart. But, to be a good teacher, you have to at least like to run your mouth a little bit, Moon in Taurus every single time.
How do you determine the values though that you have there? Like the 19 cap, where is that number?
Those are degree points that exist in the chart because every sign of the zodiac is 30 degrees long, 0 to 29. And so it travels through the zodiac at a certain speed, and the day you're born, it's at a certain place. So in other words, it's not just in Taurus, it's at 10 degrees of Taurus.
Okay.
In other words, there's a big difference between, say, 0 degrees of something and 29 degrees of something.
Yeah, no, I just had no idea how you get the value.
Yeah, they're called degree points, and they have a big factor when it comes to all the crazy aspects that are happening in the chart, which we'll get to here in a minute, hopefully. Help me keep track of time because it's on there. I don't want to go over it now. So real quick, Venus in Sagittarius basically just means, in my case, because of the house system, and by the way, the house system is based on your ascendant. Wherever your rising sign is, your ascendant, you start there and you say 1. That's 1. And then you go 30 degrees to 2, 30 degrees to 3, and then talking about your houses. Because the house for you is determined by your rising sign. That's where you start as 1. So for me, 1 is here. Archetypally, 1 is there. But for me, 1 is here, which is to say my second house is Aquarius, my third house is Pisces, my fourth house is Aries, and so on and so forth, which is to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Look where Sagittarius is. Sagittarius is 12 for me. Now, what does the 12th house represent in astrology? It represents, it's known as the house of undoing or the house of death. But it's also mutable fire, which is a spiritual sign. Which is to say that and Venus is the relationship sign. It's our sign of relationship with the other. Okay? Mars and Venus, right? The relational signs. So as a man, this is my relational sign. And this is to say that all of my relationships have to be deep and spiritual. Otherwise, I don't bother with them. Because where my Venus is. I want my relationships to be deep. Because Venus determines that for all of us. Now, my Mars is in a horrible place. I have a lot of horrible placements, and Mars is one of them. Mars is also suffering from a 10th house thing because it's in its own 10th house. You'll see it's in the very first degree of Pisces, right? Right here. This is horrible. Why? Because Mars rules here in Aries. Mars is the ruler of the very beginning of the zodiac, cardinal fire. We initiate spirit. The spring, the ground bursts with green. The branches burst with green. Everything comes back to life. It's cardinal fire. And Mars, this will be house number 1 for Mars. So Mars is in its 12th. In other words, Mars is in its weakest possible position that it could possibly be in the entire zodiac the day that I was born. So what does that mean for me? What is Mars? What is Mars? And what does it represent for us?
I know it's like about like, a little bit of your aggression, your fire. Yeah.
Yes, it's our willpower.
Yeah, I was
Mars is our-
my Mars placement is clear that I got aggressive.
Mars is our very willpower itself, which is to say, if I may be so brave, I guess if that's the right word, because of my Mars placement, I have a hard time doing that. Or at least you would think. You'd say, when I was a kid, I didn't. But as I was an adult, this came into play big time. The ability to just look in the mirror and go, you know what? I don't give a shit what anybody says. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to use all of my own force of will to manifest it or whatever to make it happen. It's that raw power of will that everyone has somewhere in their chart. And mine's just in a really weak position. It's just unavoidable. Jupiter as well. What is Jupiter for us? Jupiter is the expansive planet. It's the giant gas giant. It's the biggest in terms of its physical size of the main pantheon. It's the largest. And so we think of Jupiter as the expansive planet. It's in Virgo, which is a terrible place for it. Because Jupiter's fire and water. Jupiter rules down here, it rules here. In Virgo, it's mutable earth. It's not very comfortable. And so when people have positive Jupiter placements, they have a lot of luck in their lives. It's known as the lucky planet. There are people who literally just have smack dab beautiful thing going on with Jupiter, and they literally have luck in their life. They can throw $10 on craps table and it'll come back $1,000. I mean, it just happens because of their Jupiter placement. I've seen it, and I've talked to astrologers about the differences, and they've looked at mine and go, "Oh yeah, your Jupiter's bad. Don't gamble ever," kind of thing. Literally, don't
I want to
gamble.
know what mine is.
Or if you're like me and you have an awesome Jupiter, but it's square Saturn.
If it's square Saturn, you want to be real careful because that's going to say you might be lucky in certain situations, but Saturn's going to make you play by the rules first, right? I'm just a very broad way of interpreting that because a square is that difficult deal. So we're getting close to a very important aspect of my blueprint. Two, I would say. Two very important aspects, which I'm sort of saving for the end. And that has to do with Chiron, Mercury, which I've already listed here. And over here, I want to add Neptune at 26 degrees of Scorpio.
Gosh, that Pisces be poking at you, huh?
Well, what do we notice? Well, before we look at that, I want to go ahead and mark the south node and the north node. So this is the south node, and the north node is right up here. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. But what do you notice about the numbers on the paper? What do you see a lot of? 20s, 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 20s. A lot of late degree stuff, don't we? 24, 23, 26, 26, 26. Look at all the 26. When you see the numbers that match, what you have are direct, so-called direct hits, forming angles, forming geometry in the sky. Okay? So if I were to use the colored marker and map this out, this is where we start to get into the real coordinates of one's life. Because Chiron is 26, Mercury is 26, Neptune is 26. And so you have what's known as a trine and a sextile in straight up to the degree point in my chart. And if you look at what is involved, hello. If you look at what's involved, so we have Chiron. We know that Mercury's involved. We know that Chiron's involved. So far, what have we learned about Mercury and Chiron? Mercury's what?
26.
Right, but what does it represent?
Expression.
In the mind, right? Mercury's your mind, and Chiron is what? I mentioned it one
Wounded
time.
healer.
It's the wounded healer. Chiron is your wound. Mercury is the mind. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Chiron is the wound. Mercury is the mind. Look at the connection. 26 degrees, 26 degrees.
Yeah.
That's mental illness, y'all. It's an affliction in the mind. You can call it something different if you want, but it is an affliction in one's mind rather than in one's gallbladder or in one's lungs. It's in one's brain, literally.
Mhm.
And now to make matters even more complicated, I drew a horrible line over here, but we're connected to Neptune in Scorpio is the other corner of that triangle. Now, Neptune is comfortable to an extent in a water sign because Neptune rules Pisces over here where Chiron is. The problem is drowning because Scorpio is fixed water. It's the deep well. What part of the body does Scorpio represent? It represents the sex, the regenerative system, deep down. Neptune, particularly, and its connection to Pisces is addiction. That's addiction. And it's connected to my mind, and it's connected to the womb. the wound, but it's also connected to music. You start to see how God made me now. He put my moon in Taurus so I could express it. This is the musician. It's right there. You can see it. The mind, the tune, it's in the word. Look, tune. And there's the wound. He has to express himself musically. He has to. Look. It's the only way out. And speaking of the only way out, let's talk about the nodal axis. This may be brand new to some of y'all, and it's fine, because it's a really, really, really critical aspect of your soul that I came to find. When about 20 years ago or whenever, somebody first told me about the nodal axis, and I was completely blown away. I read some books about it. So the nodal axis is an invisible axis point in the sky which represents the motion and the cycles of the moon. And it rotates like an axial point in a counterclockwise direction. And it changes sign about every year and a half or so. And so to say that it is in a particular place when you're born. In other words, if you're born between years, the middle of this year to the end of that year, it's going to be there, and then it moves. My nodal axis is Libra, Aries. And in this particular case, what that means is that the soul's karma, the buildup, the south node represents where we have been, where our soul has traveled, what we have accumulated, what we have become good at spiritually, what we have dragged with us. That's not necessary. That's all in your south node. This is where we need to springboard from and grow out of. And the north node represents your North Star, where we're trying to aim for. In other words, everybody's trying to get to this in their life. This is the ultimate goal, is your north node. In a spiritual, in a soul sense. Now, does anybody notice anything about those 24 letters at the bottom of the page? What else do you see down there? It says North Node, South Node, and Heart of Fortune. Does anybody know what that is? Heart of Fortune is another place in the sky that is meant, it's an orb or a satellite that's meant to represent where your pot of gold is, if you will. Your part of fortune. The one place in the zodiac where if you can reach it, your pot of gold is going to be there. And what do you notice? It's in the same exact place as my north node. Exact.
Destination.
Which is to say, my pot of gold is in my soul's true purpose. Because your north node is your soul's true purpose. My pot of gold is not in some career path. It's not in some normal Capricornian way. It's in the soul's true path. But there's a big obstacle in the way because Saturn is there, my ruling planet, and it's very uncomfortable there. And there's another snag too, which I'll throw in there. And then we'll just toss it out to the room for a little bit. Is that there's another thing called the midheaven. You see it up towards the top of the page. It's at 23 degrees of Libra, which is literally right next to this, right? The midheaven has to do with your career. In other words, where your midheaven is placed is where you are best suited for vocational work. Libra is where we get the learned library and bibliotech and teacher and all that. This is why I'm a teacher. This is why this room is called a library. This is the word library. The word library is Libra, R-Y. This room right here is called the library because my south node's librarian. I know how to do that really well. What I don't know how to do is that. And in a spiritual sense, what that means is step out on one's own in a Martian way, be more like Mars. But I can't, in a sense, or have a hard time doing that because of where Mars is. It's at 1 degree of Pisces, which is a very weak place for it to be. Questions about any of that? About the nodal axis or the ruling planet? Does anybody want to chime in on what their ruling planet is? Or what their sign is? Yes, please.
Like my sun.
What you got?
Sun is Aries,
Yeah.
moon's Aquarius, and rising is Cancer. I have a lot of Aries in my chart.
We talked about this in the kitchen before we even got started.
Yeah.
You have a square. You have a square. We talked about the square, didn't we? Because Joy has a square in her chart, a very important one, because it's your sun and your rising sign, right?
Yeah.
Because you have, what was it again? Aries sun,
Aries, sun,
And-
rising Cancer.
Cancer rising. Look, she's got the square. Because her sun is here and her rising sign is there. Which is to say her soul is doing one thing, maybe when her body's doing another. Is it true? I don't know. It's a very broad interpretation.
I can relate to that even though I don't have that placement.
What's yours?
My sun is Scorpio, moon is Libra, and rising is Capricorn, and my card of fortune is Capricorn.
Say that again.
Sun is Scorpio, moon is Libra, rising is Capricorn, and so is card of fortune.
Moon's over here.
For Libra,
One of the most fascinating studies, and again, this is meant as a point of inspiration, not to, because we could go down so many rabbit holes with this, and we don't, in an hour it's just nothing. Because again, to me, to drive the point home, to me, because I don't read other people's charts, I don't do that. I mean, maybe I could with some practice, and I have tried it, but I can do very, very general stuff. The point is that's a gift that somebody has. It's a particular kind of intuitive gift, and they just happen to use astrology as their tool. Just like somebody might use tarot cards or other kinds of divination or dice or whatever, or none of the above. Nuns use the rosary beads. It's all about getting in a trance and reading into the energy. But each of us, not only can we benefit from learning more, deepening our understanding of the language to know thyself, but what happens is it starts to reconnect your neurons when you start to do it. And you start to get the downloads and your neurons start to reconnect in a 4D way, because you start to think in a 4D way when you think astrologically, because it is a 4D language. It's a spiritual science. And if I had the time, which we don't, because it's too beautiful of a day, and we got lots of fellowship to do, but I could prove to you that it is behind all of the great religions of the world that are in the world today. It is a foundational, structural point, building block of all of the great religions. And I'm not condemning or pointing a finger at any of those great religions. I have nothing but respect for all of them. And we could talk about just the Bible alone. I have another lecture that does that. Just astrology and the Bible itself. It's a subject called astrotheology, which is fascinating. And it kind of proves my point. Are any more questions or things to say about their own personal?
I have a quick
Yeah.
question, a general question. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Stellium, is that a separate planet or is just certain placements of stellium?
Oh, stellium, you mean?
Yeah.
Stellium is real simple. It's anytime you have three or more things in the same sign, basically.
Okay.
Three or more. Some people say two or more, but I say three. Three makes a stellium, basically. What you got, man?
So I'm brand new to all this. But I'm seeing that it's very mathematical.
Very,
Yeah.
yes. And musical too.
Musical.
It's both. It's so deep. I mean, it was weird because I was always musical and I did okay in math, but at a certain point I just started to suck. Like I didn't understand calculus. I started to face melt at trigonometry for some reason, but with music, it just kept. And then when I started learning this, it was a different kind of, so yes, it's mathematical, but it's not math, if you will. Just like music is mathematical, but it's also not math.
Yeah. Art.
It's like a spiritual math. It's a spiritual math, if you will, a 4D math.
And the values, then you get those based on like daytime and is it location or time zone or something?
It's location.
Location you're born in, and that gives you the values that you have up there to be able to determine where your planets are.
The charts are coordinated every moment of every day nowadays by the cloud, by the computer. Everybody, any astrologer you could right now look up exactly where all the planets are right this minute and keep track of it. And they're charted and as perfectly as they could be. And therefore every day, every moment someone's born, we know exactly where they are. And that's what these degree points come from.
That's cool.
January 9th, 1968.
I knew like zero about this before you started talking. So I'm like, well, I was born in June 20th, so Gemini. I know nothing about the rest of this. This is mind blowing.
So yeah, okay. So you know that June 20th, which is the day before Cancer, actually.
Yeah.
You are very, very late Gemini, which means you're like 29 degrees Gemini, which means you have aspects of Cancer in your blueprint because you're right on the cusp between Gemini and Cancer. You have air in your chart and water in your chart because of that.
Oh, wow.
That's an interesting place to be born because you're right on the summer solstice,
Yeah.
like a day before.
It's that's cool.
Anybody else? I'm not going to keep you all day. Good. Have a great evening, y'all.
Great to have you.
David.
I told you I wasn't going to keep you.
Great.
That was cool.
Wrinkle my brain a little bit.